Welcome back. Our next guest has lived many lives. She was one of India's first supermodels and a beloved actress, starring in both Bollywood and North American films and television. But her life changed when she was diagnosed with multiple myeloma at age 37. Joining us now to discuss her journey, detailed in her new memoir, Close to the Bone, is author and activist Lisa Ray. Welcome, Lisa. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jess and Cynthia.
Lisa, we are delighted to dive into this incredible piece, this memoir that you've written. And I want to start back in 2009 at the Toronto International Film
Mhm.
Festival. You were on the red carpet, and you chose that moment to tell the world about the fact that you had cancer. So why was it important for you to choose that moment in particular to share your story with the world?
That's a great question to kick off with. It's also where I started the narrative of the book as well. And Close to the Bone starts with me actually trying to find a pair of shoes to fit into because I was on very heavy steroids and every single part of me, particularly my ankles, had bloated up. So I felt that it was a really interesting visual way of bringing together the two worlds that I had been occupying for some time. And that was, of course, the world of fantasy and entertainment, or you could say
Mhm.
entertainment slash fantasy and illusion, and the much more serious events that I was going through, which was being newly diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And I got a lot of advice after I was newly diagnosed, which was to hide my diagnosis, to
Mhm.
just not say anything, and to also essentially hide myself away as well. And of course, there was some time that I needed to process what I was going through. Multiple myeloma, for those of you who don't know, is a fairly serious blood cancer. It's a malignancy of the plasma in the bone marrow. Most people can't pronounce it. I couldn't pronounce it either when I was newly diagnosed. And it's considered a fatal disease. So obviously, I had a lot to process when I was diagnosed. And I didn't announce my diagnosis again because a lot of people around me told me not to.
Just for one second, I'm just curious as to why they were telling you that. Were they worried that was going to impact future roles or it was too
Yeah.
personal?
I think so. I think it was a bit of both.
Lisa, I'm very curious though, because you've been very outspoken about how many of us perceive celebrity, and you do want to change that. So tell us a little more about why that's important for you to change how many of us kind of perceive it, to that narrative.
See, I'm now settled on this idea that celebrity, these beautiful images that we see, these what do we call them? Aspirational images, which are actually not aspirational because nobody looks like that even in real life anymore, especially with all the
It's
filters
true.
that we use and with 3.5 hours of hair and makeup, etc. I wanted to sort of break that terrible cycle of, particularly younger women comparing themselves to standards that really don't exist.
Let's talk a little bit more about this idea of identity and coming to terms with it because you have a really interesting background. Part of the memoir talks about the fact that
Mm.
your father, who was from India, met your mother on a trip to Warsaw, Poland, and then they, had a connection, and then they started sending letters back and forth and married a few years later. How did this, mixed heritage that you have inform your sense of self as you were growing up?
That is such a great question. And it's actually the quintessential Canadian question, I would say. And we should be really proud of it as well. Yes, I'm of mixed racial background. And of course, growing up in Toronto in the late 70s, 80s, I just turned 49 recently, so I'm very proud of that. Um, I didn't have a lot of role models. I didn't have a lot of people that I could model myself on, strong women of mixed heritage. And I used to, when I was growing up, I grew up in Etobicoke in a great neighborhood, and most of our neighbors were Italian and Portuguese. And, we were sharing tomatoes over the back fence and making wine in each other's garages. And it was a beautiful upbringing. However, I used to often get what I also think of as the quintessential Canadian question, which is, but what are you? And when they were asking, what are you? They were not asking about my gender or, what did I stand for? They were asking ethnically, what are you? And often I would be, labeled as, well, maybe you're Italian, maybe you're Portuguese, particularly because of the neighborhood I had grown up in. And I even ended up picking up a little Portuguese as well from our neighbors. But I would be very defiant then. I would stand, back on my heels, and I would often look up at that person and I would announce very proudly, but I'm Indian.
Hmm.
And I would not always talk about my Polish background because I wanted to challenge, even at that young age, people's perceptions of what it meant to be of a South Asian background.
Let's talk about the fact that 2 years ago, you became a mother to twins, Sufi and Soleil. Such beautiful
Hmm.
names. And you did that through surrogacy, which I think is something that is such a wonderful thing that not enough people talk about. So, what was that like?
I'm so glad that you asked me about that as well. These are great questions. I obviously had to turn to surrogacy as I couldn't carry children post my cancer treatment. So I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma in 2009. I actually relapsed in 2012, shortly after getting married. And then, I've been fortunately in remission ever since, and very healthy. And I want to give a great shout out to Princess Margaret Hospital in Toronto as well. I think it's really one of the reasons that I'm here. And having lived and traveled around the world, I have to say that the care that you can get in Canada is, there's absolutely, it's exceptional. There's almost no comparison anywhere else in the world in my experience. But anyways, moving on. So when my husband and I decided that we wanted to start a family, and we were doing it quite late, we got married at 40, and we decided to have children around 45 because for a long time, to be honest, I was reluctant. I felt that I had a lot of other things I wanted to do with my life. I had a very nomadic life that didn't really support having a family, particularly
Hmm.
children. But once there was no shoulda, coulda, woulda left, I really, really did embrace this idea of motherhood wholeheartedly. And of course, cancer did contribute to that because when you're dealing with your mortality, it really makes you look at your priorities.
Lisa, you are a remarkable storyteller. You're a remarkable woman, and you've been on this remarkable journey. And I'm going to challenge you essentially because you
Okay.
are such a good storyteller. I know you can do this. If you had to describe how life is today, right now, with one word,
Mhm.
what would it be?
One word.
Yep, sorry.
You're turning me into a poet.
Yep.
I have to find the one word for one word for life today.
Mm,
Mm. I'm going to make up a word.
okay.
Do it.
Con peaceful.
So, con peaceful,
Peaceful
like,
and content,
And
content and
contented.
peaceful. I'll
oh,
Yes,
I
take it.
like
yes.
it. Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your story today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you guys. Honestly, it was great meeting you both as well. I wish that we were in the studio together, but
Us
I'll
too.
take it. It was a great
Next
chat,
time.
and thank you for having me. And thank you
Cheers.
for talking about Close to the Bone.
Amazing. It is Close to the Bone is available now. Go get yourself a copy and we'll be right back.